Welcome back. In this video, we're going to be introducing lists, the list component. So lists are very fundamental components when it comes to software development. Just about every application that deals with data, right, has to use lists to represent said data. So you can think of YouTube, you have a list of videos. You can think of the comment section, a list of comments. If you had an e-commerce store, list of products, so on and on and on and on. And on this platform, we handle lists, in a very, very easy and clean way. All right. I'm currently in the Inhouz Cloud app builder, and today we're going to be working with lists. Now, our data set is going to come from this service called Random Data API. All it does is basically just generate some random data. And for this video, we're going to be using random user data. All right. So let me go into my app builder, and I'm just going to configure this data set into my application. In this video, we're going to consume this data in a static manner. And in upcoming videos, we're going to use server-side functions to pull in this data. All right. So I have some random stale data in my application. I'm just going to go ahead and get rid of all of this. So this is user data. I'm going to call this user list, and it's going to be an array of objects. So I already have my query here in my browser, and there are 45 records. I'm just going to copy everything. All right. And I'm just going to paste it in here. Perfect. Perhaps there was an issue somewhere. Okay. Let me just make sure that everything was copied properly. Copy. Come back over here, and I can just go ahead and delete all of this and try that again. User list. Paste that in. There we go. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and save. So real quick, let's just take a look at our data. We have first name, last name, username, email, and then avatar. All right. So I think we're just going to work with this identification data set, and we're just going to represent that using the list component. So I have this data in my initial app data. I'm just going to refresh the page. All right. And now it's in my live app data. All right. So if you're wondering what app data is, please watch the app data video. All right. So let's go into our elements tab and go into the components section, and we're going to see our list element. Okay. I see the table. Oh, there it is in the data visualization. Perfect. All right. So I'm going to drag and drop my list on the page. So you can see I have my list elements. If you look at the hierarchy, I have my list. It has a bunch of nested elements, the list data row, the list items. So I'm just going to select my list and just center it really quickly. So margin right, auto, margin left, auto, give it a width of, let's call it 50%. Put some margin at the top. Let's call that 20 pixels. All right, looking good. And what we're going to do here is that we're going to connect our list to our data source. All right, so if I go into the element settings, quickly selecting the list again, let's just take a look at the attributes for our list components. Very, very simple, very straightforward. We have the app data field. So this right here is basically the field in our app data that points to our data set. Manage data flow. This kind of means the same thing as it means in the form elements. So when manage data flow is true, this means that you have to provide the data for your list. So let's say if manage data flow is true, then we need to provide the data for our list. But by default, it's false, and the system is going to bind the data to the list based on the app data field that you provide. All right, so use pagination is false here. If it was true, then you would basically be able to add pagination to your list with no extra work. Display limits, right? So display limit just means the limit of elements or the limits of list item rows to display. And then the title and the draggable, these are just your standard HTML attributes. And its non-reactive is an attribute that we use to optimize elements, especially elements in lists and tables. And we're going to come into this in our list optimization and table optimization videos. All right. So really quickly, our data set is currently mapped to the user list field in our app data. So we're going to point to that field over here. So I'm going to just type in user list. All right. So the system automatically finds that data set. And as you can see, we have about 10 rows. And this is because we have a display limit of 10, right? What happens if we turn on pagination? All right. The system automatically determines that we have 45 records, right? Because our data set, we set the size to 45. And we have a display limit here of 10. So the system is smart enough and just breaks it up into the appropriate buckets. So now we have 45 records, all right? 45 records, we have 5 tabs, and our list looks like this. So you're going to notice that the list has a small or narrow height. And if you were to look at the element hierarchy, and you were to look at our list and jump into the styling for our list, you will see that there is no height on the list item, on the list element itself. And if you were to look into the wrapper for the data, there is a default height here of 200 pixels, right? So what we're going to do eventually is to get rid of this height so that it takes whatever shape the individual rows take. So if you wanted to have a hard and fast height, you could leave this here, but you can always get rid of it, right? And then it would take whatever shape that the list items take. Now the list items also have a default height of 50 pixels, and you could basically adjust this or get rid of it so it takes whatever size of it, the elements within it occupy. All right, so for now, we're just going to increase this slightly to 150. And we're just doing this so that we can drag and drop with ease, and then we're going to resize it. All right. Okay, so now we are trying to work with our user data. All right. So to work with our user data, I want to just introduce one more concept. It's basically the mapping into list item data, right? Or row data. So on this platform, we refer to data within a list, right, as the list item data, right? So we have these 2 parameters, or 3 parameters rather. In list means that whatever element that you're operating with is itself within a list. List item data is basically the data in a row. You can think of this as the row data. And the list item index is basically the index of that row, right? So the same way you have, app data readily available within your script user interface. So if I were to type app data, you're going to see that parameter pop up. Is the exact same way that list item data is also available for you. And you can use this, from any logic, any elements, right? Within the platform. And if that element is indeed within a list, then that value will have some data in it. If not, it's just going to be null. All right. So from our list here, we can just go ahead and start doing some cool stuff. All right. So what I'm going to do here is this. I'm just going to change our list item to display flex. All right. And we are just going to put things apart, and we're going to put some space. Let's put some space between. All right. That looks good. All right. So I'm going to drag in an image. All right. And I'm going to drag in a div. All right. So I have my image, I have my div. I'm going to give this image here a width. Call it a width of, let's call it 20%. All right. Now it looks weird. Actually, this is not width, this is height. All right. Let's get rid of that and let's give it a width of 20%. Awesome. And I'm going to give this here a width of 70%. All right. I'm going to give my div here a height of, just for this moment, we're going to give it a height. Let's call this height 100 pixels. All right. So the goal of this video is not to make this the most beautiful thing you've seen. I just want to show you how to work with lists. All right. So I added some style into my list item data. I've dragged and dropped 2 elements in it. Now let's map to some data. All right. So from our data set, we can see that our user has an avatar, right? So we're basically just going to map to that field. And like I said earlier with the list item data, watch what I do here. I'm going to go to the source. So by default, we have this random library Pixum, is it Lorem Pixum? We're going to just switch this out. For this one, I'm going to use no code. And in the upcoming mappings, I'm just going to use code, all right, to go faster. So we're going to just reference list item data. In fact, let me pop this out so you can see it properly. We're going to reference list item data. And then we're going to map into it, right? Because it's an object or an array. And then we're going to map into the field called avatar. All right. Close this out. There you go. We have our image. So here we're going to drag in a couple elements, just some text blocks. We're going to drag in a text block. I am going to make this text block full width. So take it from 90% to 100%. I'm going to give it a margin at the bottom of, let's say, 10 pixels. All right. And I'm going to duplicate this by just hitting Control right multiple times. And now I have 3 elements. Really quickly, I'm just going to get rid of the default height of our wrapper div. All right, there you go. Perfect. All right. So for the first one, we're going to map this to the name. So I want this to be first name, last name. And if we just jump back into our data sets, the first name is first underscore name, and the last name is last underscore name. So I'm going to go into my text block here. I'm going to switch to dynamic text because this is not going to be static text. So in my dynamic text, I'm going to just pop this out real quick. I'm going to switch here to code. And we're just going to map into the list item data. I could do this one of 2 ways. I could do this using an old school syntax. I could use the more modern syntax. So I could just use my anchor strings and just say parameter dot list item data in camel case and first underscore name, give it a space, open up another template, and then say again parameter dot list item data dot last underscore name. And if I wanted to just make sure that, maybe I'm covered and I don't have any weird looking spaces anywhere, I can just put a trim at the end. Not necessary, but all right. So now I have that name. Let's go ahead and map that email. Again, I'm going to just click on this element, go into the text block. I'm going to expand this and switch to code. And I'm going to do this without any of the strings. Just going to say parameter dot list item data dot email. All right. And now, well, that did not work. So maybe there was something wrong somewhere. Let me see. It's called email for sure. So I definitely had a misspelling somewhere. Let me just go back into it. Text block 11. Okay. Parameter dot list item data dot email. list item data dot email. All right. Oops. There we go. Use dynamic text. Has to be true. There you go. All right, perfect. Let's go to the last one. And here, what do we want to map? Let's see. Let's map the username. All right. So that's username. So let's go ahead and do that. And this time around, let's not forget to like make this dynamic text. And then we're going to just pop this out and switch to code. We're just going to say parameter the list item data dot username. But let's also just make this a little bit cool, and let's make this look like a handle. Let's put the at and add it up. All right. Okay. There we go. You can see it's looking like a handle. All right. So that's pretty much it. You see how we've basically just mapped. We've created a list. We've basically mapped it out. We have this two blocks of elements. We have a div with some data. We have the image. It's paginated, right? As you can see, I can go to the next page and see the next set of user data. It goes to the next one, see the next set of data. Now, obviously, we haven't done any much styling here. If we were to do some styling, we could definitely clean things up for sure. If we just jumped in here really quickly, all right, look at the list item data. There is some fixed height. We can get rid of that. Okay. Jump in to see the div. All right, what is the height? Okay, so there isn't a default height, so that's good. But let's go back to the outer elements. Let's center everything. That's perfect. All right, so there you have it. In this video, we've basically dragged and dropped a list element. We've connected it to a data source. We've gone over how to map data into elements within our list. We talked about the list item data. We talked about the list item index, and we talked about the list field. Before we go, just as a bonus item, I'm just going to duplicate this element here, and we're just going to map one more thing, which is just the list item data really quickly. List item index, sorry. All right, really quickly. Dynamic text, true. Oops, there we go. Get rid of that. List item index. All right, so as you can see, this is just, a representation of the index of the record. As you can see, if you know anything about JavaScript, this is very, very familiar to you. This is basically a row with an index 0. So row 1 with an index 0, row 2 with an index 1, and on and on and on. And if we went all the way to, let's say, page 5, we're going to end up 44 because we have 45 records. All right, so that's it for this video. In the next video, we're going to go into more details about pagination. All right, see you in the next one.